Okay, welcome to InDesign Fundamentals. Before we jump into the practice project, I'm just going to go over some basic things with InDesign. So basic design is a vector program. And what vector is basically instead of working in pixels like a raster image does, it works with things called like anchor points and handles, and it makes mathematical calculations between those. Basically, what that means is with the raster image, you know how like when you scale things super big or super small, they get really pixelated. If you're working with vectors, since it's not working with pixels and it's just calculating the curves between anchor points, what that means is if you scale something really big, is it won't get super blurry and pixelated. So you can kind of see on the example I have in the PDF that goes over some of the introduction. You can see on the right here is a raster image, and I zoomed in to about 1,000%, I think, but or it was at 800 magnification. So both of these are at 800 magnification, but you can see on the raster one, it's got like this stair-stepping kind of effect going on, whereas on the vector one, it's still a straight, crisp line. So that's why InDesign is used for a lot of print-related media. You can make a bunch of layouts, you make things for billboards, and you don't have to worry too much about scaling, because if you need to blow something up, you can. Something to keep in mind, even though things you create inside InDesign are vector images, if you place an image in there, like say if you go to Pixabay, you grab a stock photo and you want to use that stock photo in your project, pasting it into InDesign isn't going to magically make it a vector object. It's still going to be made of pixels. So you can't, even though you can scale the rest of your project, that particular image is still going to be blurry depending on how much you scale it up. So just kind of keep that in mind if you're going to be adding photos to your project. Even though objects can be scaled pretty easy, that photo can't be, so make sure it's as big or bigger than you need it to be. So just kind of keep that in mind. And we're going to just skip real quick to some terminology. So you know, I mentioned earlier with vectors, they work in anchor points and handles. An anchor point is the corners or the points where paths connect, and then a handle controls the curve. So you can see in the example here, you've got the anchor point here and you've got the handle, and it goes off and it makes this curve, whereas on the other side there's no curve, so it's just straight line. And you'll kind of see this a bit more as we do more complicated projects. So some just basic workspace stuff. I'm going to get out of this real quick. So if your workspace doesn't look like mine up here, if you go up into the application bar is this very top bit. It's right below the file bar. You'll see this drop down menu. It's right between the light bulb and the search bar here. If you just click that, if you have something that looks closer to what my workspace is right now, if you just go to that drop down menu and hit Essentials Classic, it'll look similar to what my workspace is. You might not have quite as many panels over here. These panels over here are customizable depending on the last person who used the program or on your particular preference. So you might have a few less of these, but you can always add those, and I'll show you how to do that a bit later. So some main areas I want you to focus on are the file bar. That's going to have things like your file new, document, file open, file place, and then it's got some other things that we'll use later on, like your layout margins, layout numbering. Probably the most important one is if you go to Window, this lists all of the panels. So like everything that you could want over here will be listed here. The reason I want to point that out is if we're going through a project and for some reason you don't have what I'm working on over here, like if you don't have the pages panel or if you don't have a line, you would just go to Window and you would just find it in the list. Now some of these are nested, so like for color you'd go to color or swatches. Align is under object and layout. You can see there. So if for some reason you don't have a panel over here that I'm using, just go to Window and find it over here. The next area is the control panel. The control panel is this bar along here. It has a lot of the controls for like changing shapes, or like when we're working with a type tool, that's where you change like the style, the font, the size, things like that. Transparency is also found up here, so it's right next to the stroke. Next are your tools. The tools are off to your left. Now there's a couple configurations you can work with. You can either hit that arrow and double it up, or you can keep them long and skinny, but you can also grab it and drag it out, so that way if like you're working on a particular part of the document, you want the tools nearby, you can just go over, reach them, and just go back to whatever you're working on. To put it back, you just click and drag it until that blue line appears, and it will dock itself to the side. You can also drag out panels. Like if you're working with a lot of little itty bitty pieces and you're going to be using the align tool or the align tools a lot, or you're going to be using Pathfinder a lot, you can just click and drag that out and make that a window, and then just zoom in on whatever you're working on, and you'll always have that window right nearby. Because with the tools, these all pretty much have shortcuts, so usually you won't really need to pop that out and drag it over to where you're working on, because you just use the keyboard to select the tool you want. Not all of these have shortcuts, so you're more likely to just drag out the panel and have it close by to where you're working, so that way you don't have to keep working over here, go back over here, select it, blah blah blah. You can just have it right out where you need it. So let me just put this back. Okay. That's kind of the stuff that we'll be working with a lot with the workspace out here. A couple things, or a couple terms that I'll be using a lot is, so the page is the document that you're working on. Everything on it is going to be printed out. But the area outside the page here, so like this gray area, that's your pasteboard. You'll use your pasteboard for like if you have a element and you're not sure if you want to use it or not, you can just drag it off to the side and just keep it on the pasteboard, and that way it's off of your document and it's out of the way. It's also handy for like if you're working on a little complicated design, you can work on it on the pasteboard here, so that way you don't have to worry about selecting things or getting in the way of things on your actual document. You just do what you need to over here, and then once you're finished with it, you can just drag it over and place it where you need it to go. So this gray area out here is your pasteboard. This is your page. If you look at the purple line that's going around my page here, it's kind of a pink purple. That's your margin. The margin lays out the safe zone that you'll be working with. So like that's primarily to do with like printed things. So the reasoning behind that is like if you put things way too close to the edge here, you run the risk of either the printer messing up and not quite printing all of your text, or you run the risk of when your project's going to be trimmed, you run the risk of it getting cut off. So by figuring out what your safe zone is, you can, when you open the document, you have an option to put in your own custom margins. You can put in your margin and you know everything within that space is safe and you don't have to worry about it getting accidentally cut off. We'll go a bit more into like printing practices and things like that later on in other projects. Just know that these pink and purple lines are your margins. This particular document doesn't have it, but in the example I have here, you'll see a red line around the outside. This is called a bleed. You'd use a bleed if you have a graphic that you want to be printed all the way to the very edge of the project. So like, let's say I wanted this to reach the edge here. You wouldn't just leave it like that, because whoever trims the project, or whatever machine trims the project, they have to be super precise in order to get to the very edge of the image and avoid a little white gap. So what you do is you would, when you create the document, you would add a bleed, and you would extend this image to the bleed. So that way there's a bit of a margin of error when the project is trimmed, and you don't have to worry about them being super precise when they cut. They just have to get close to where they're supposed to cut, and you won't get a white gap. And we'll go into that a bit more in lesson 2. So next up, I will go into some of the tools and some of the panels that you'll use a lot. Okay, so first up is the selection tool. The shortcut for that is V. That's just your black arrow. That's just like your ordinary cursor. You can select stuff and move it around. Not a whole lot to that. The next one is your direct selection tool. The shortcut for that is A. What that allows you to do is that lets you handle things like anchor points and handles, and I'll show you kind of what that means here in a second. Let me make a shape. Alright, so I have my white arrow selected, and you'll see there are these dots around the circle here. If I select one, the handles appear. That's those little stick things that are coming off the anchors. And with the white arrow, I can grab an anchor point and I can drag it around. I can grab the handles and either make the curve bigger. I can slant the curve. There's a bunch of stuff you can do with editing your shapes with the white arrow. I will also mention the pen tool. The shortcut for that is P. That lets you make shapes to make a anchor point with a curve on it. You just click and drag, and then to close the shape, you'll see a little circle appear once you get to the end. It helps if you actually hit the point. There we go. Another tool you might use is the add the anchor point tool. So if you go to the pen tool, there's a whole bunch of different options. If you hit plus, that lets you add anchor points to an object. Then you can grab your white arrow and move those around as need be and mess with their handles. And then if you hit minus, you can delete anchor points. So let's say I want to get rid of that one. There you go. And then there's another one, which is Shift C. That is called your convert direction point tool. That comes in handy. Let's say you have like a rectangle and you don't want it to have those right angles on it. You want it to be curved. You can grab this convert direction point tool, click on the anchor point you want to change. and you can give it anchor points. So those are some things that you'll probably use a lot. InDesign is good for making some simple motifs or simple decorations. If you're going to do a super complicated piece of artwork, I would go ahead and make it in Illustrator. Illustrator works almost pretty much the exact same to InDesign, except it's geared more towards drawing and creating images, whereas InDesign is meant more for like handling assets and creating page layouts. It's more for organizing rather than creating, although you can create shapes in here. It's just for super complicated stuff. I use Illustrator for like little designs that you're going to use at just like the corner of your page. You can make it in here. You can just make it over in the pasteboard and then move it over onto the page when you're finished. One thing I want to point out is you'll notice over here, it looks like there are two rectangle tools. In reality, there's only one. This is the actual rectangle tool. It makes shapes. You can go up here, add your fill, add your stroke. There you go. But the tool that's on top of it, that's a frame tool. Now they work really similarly, except a frame tool is what you'll use if you know what you want your layout to look like, but you don't quite have the assets. You'll see that in the practice project that we'll do here in a sec. But what you can do is you can place the frames onto your layout, make the layout how you want it to look, and then once you have everything the way you want it organized, you can just go to File, Place, and just grab what you want and then click on the frame it's supposed to go in, and it will go in the frame. And you can do that for text too. So File, Place. See, there you go. Okay, the hand tool is going to be super useful for like moving things around or moving your page around. If you hold spacebar, that brings up the hand tool. You can move things around. You can also just bring up the tool by hitting H. I like just using the spacebar because the spacebar brings up the hand tool, lets you move it around, and then when you let go, it goes back to the tool you were using earlier. So that's a quick way to switch between the two and get what you need done. There's the zoom tool. You can just zoom into what you need or zoom out. To be honest, I don't use the zoom tool a whole lot. What I actually use is the shortcut. So like if you want to zoom in, just hit Command plus, or if you're on Windows, you'd use Control plus. That lets you go into a project. If you hit Command minus, or if you're on Windows, Control minus, that lets you zoom out. Okay, if you hit Command 0 or Control 0, that fits your page into your window. If you want to look at the entire spread, what you'll do is you'll hit Command Option 0 if you're on a Mac, or Control Alt 0 if you're on Windows, and that fits the entire spread into your window there. Next up is the color picker. So you either go over into your panels off to your right, or if you just go to Window, Color, Color. This, when you first bring it up, you might have something that looks like this. Just go to where those lines are and hit Show Options, and it'll give you some sliders. So let me pick a different color. Then if you change it to CMYK, it gives you these sliders so you can make your own custom colors. Alternatively, if you go to swatches, InDesign has a bunch of presets in there, but also if you're doing a project and there is a custom color that you're going to be using a lot, you can just right click in the color picker, add to swatches, and then if we go to swatches, it'll add it to the very bottom here. Something else that you might need to know is the default for naming swatches when you create them is it just uses its like chemical makeup. If you right click and go to swatch options, turn off name with color value, you can just give it a custom name. And just hit OK. And now it's changed the name over here. Okay, the next panel you're probably going to be using a lot is pages. You'll be definitely using this if you're doing something that has like multiple pages in it, so like a small booklet or a magazine. And this has a list of all your different pages. You can click to select them. This is also where your master pages are. Master pages are something that you'll use if you have a certain like style or a motif, or if you have page numbers. You'd add that to your master page, and then each page is linked to a master page. And what that allows you to do is you just have to make the designs or the layouts once here, and then you just drag it down to the page you want it to apply to, and it applies that design to every page that's linked to it. So like, let's say if I don't like the pink anymore, let's say I want to go with purple and orange. So now if I go to my pages, you'll see all the left pages have updated to include that purple and orange no matter what page I go to. So that's why you might want to use a master page for some of your layout designs. Okay, another panel you might use is layers. The layer system pretty much works like it does in Illustrator, Photoshop. If you've used an Adobe product before, the layer system pretty much works the same. Everything that's on top is going to be shown over everything that's below it. So this is handy if like you have a background image on a page and you don't want to keep selecting it every time you want to move an asset. You can just put it on a separate layer, lock it, and now you can select and move stuff around as much as you want. You don't have to worry about accidentally moving that background image. You'd probably be using the align panel a lot. What that does is it just helps you align things or organize things a bit better. So like say I have all these circles and I want them to, I want to have their centers aligned with each other. I just go into the panel, change align, make sure this is set to selection, because you can also align it to say like the margins, the page, things like that. I'm just going to keep it at align to selection, and you see it moves them all so that way their centers go through the same spot. You can also distribute objects. So let's say I want these all to be evenly spaced. I just make sure that I have one at the start, one at the end. I select all of them, make sure they're even, and then I go down to distribute spacing, and it distributes them the way I want them to. If you aren't seeing all the options I have here, just again go up here and change show options. The next one up is the stroke panel. So I'm gonna just make a shape here. Okay, so what the stroke panel lets you do, let me pick a different color here so you can actually see it. Okay, so the stroke panel lets you change things like the ends. So instead of it being cut off, I can change it to a rounded corner or to a rounded end. If I want a rounded corner instead of a sharp corner, I can change that as well. A bunch of different options you can pick from here. You can also change like the type. So if you want a more decorative shape, you can just pick that here. If you want a dashed line, you can do that, and then you just change the gaps depending on how big you want your dashes to be. You can also change you control how the ends look. So like, let's say you have something like this where you have text pointing to something. Rather than making a line and an object, what you can do is, let me modify my line here. Okay, so let's say I want this to be pointing to something. I can go to the start end, and there's a bunch of different options you can pick from. You can like have like a solid circle. You can have an arrow, and you can pick which kind of arrow you want it to look like. Things like that. And you can also have a double end here. So let's just let you control your paths and your strokes and things like that. And then if you download this PDF, it has a bunch of shortcuts. I tried to include the Macs and the PCs. Depending on if this is a shared computer, you can customize your shortcuts. So if one of these shortcuts isn't working, or if you want to know the shortcut for something in particular, if you hover over the tool, you can see it actually tells you what the shortcut for it is, but also you just go to Edit and then Keyboard Shortcuts. And this is for both Macs and PCs. You just go to Edit, Keyboard Shortcuts, and then depending on what you want to mess with, like if you want to just go to Tools, you can see it has all the tools listed there, and then you can set a shortcut for it. So, kind of going over some of the very basics. InDesign is a big project, and as we go through the semester, you will pick up a lot more, and a lot of the stuff will be easier to memorize once you've gotten a few projects under your belt. So, go ahead, if you haven't already, go to Canvas and download this Lesson 1 zip. That's going to have our first practice project in it. What you're going to do is make sure it's expanded. So on Windows, you'd have to right click, and then there would be an option to like extract or expand. In Mac, you just have to double click on it, and it'll expand it for you. I've already got it expanded, and you're just going to open up this Start. And you'll see that our pasteboard is grayed out, and there's not much in this project right now. That's okay. First thing I want you to do is, once you have it open, go down to the bottom left hand corner here, click on that menu and change that to normal. Preview's handy if you want to look at your project and you just want to block out all the tail end stuff that you have on your pasteboard, or if you have something that has a bleed on it and it's extending past it, that can kind of throw off the look. preview just lets you kind of block all that things out, so you're only seeing what's going to be cut and trimmed. Another alternative is if you hit Shift W, that brings you into presentation mode. That blocks out your workspace as well as the pasteboard, so that gives you a good idea of what your project's going to look like once it's printed out. So go ahead, just make sure that the presentation is set to normal. And first thing I want you to look at is, if you look at the bottom, you'll see a little red dot that says 1 error. This is our Preflight. Preflight tracks all these little errors you might have in your document. So in our case, if we go here, it's overset text. And if you double click on it, it brings you to the problem object. So like you can see here, there's a little plus sign on our text frame telling us that we have more text than what's fitting into that frame there. A Preflight also will track things like if you have a link to an image that isn't working, it'll have that listed there. If you have a link to another document, it'll list if there are issues there. Some of like the animation stuff I think is also listed in here. But for right now, we've just have the text frame that we have to deal with. So just grab your selection tool. That's the black arrow. You can hit V. And we're just going to drag that frame a little bit bigger. And voila. Now you can see the error's gone away because we've expanded the frame so that way it can fit in all of the text. You can even see the dot's gone from red to green and it says no errors. So go ahead and close out Preflight. I want you guys to be looking at Preflight before you turn anything in, because Preflight will let you know if there's an error with your project. It's just a fast way. Sometimes when you're working on things, you kind of get a blindness going on. You won't always notice the overset text or if there's a link missing. So just make sure that before you turn anything in, you've got that little green dot at the bottom. Okay, next up what we're going to do is we're going to change cafe to bistro. And that's really simple. We're just going to grab our type tool. You can hit T on your keyboard. And we're just going to click into the frame and then just type in bistro. Next up, what we're going to do is I want bistro and bar to be bolded. So in order to do that, we have to highlight and go up into your control panel. That's the bar up here. You'll probably have the paragraph formatting stuff open. Go to the A, click on that. And then underneath your font type, you'll notice this drop down menu where it says regular. Change that to bold. Not, just as a heads up, not every font option has italic bold, bold italic. Depending on what font you're using, they may have a different list of stuff here. So just keep that in mind when you pick different fonts for things. So next up, we're going to deselect. So grab your selection tool and click in your paste board. So that way you have nothing selected. Next up is we're going to load in some text from a Word document. Nowadays, InDesign does have spell check, but a long time ago it didn't. So sometimes it was better to have your text done in Word, so that way you could work out all of your grammar, and you do spell check and just editing stuff. You can do all that in Word, type it up, and then you would just place it into your InDesign document. It's also handy to just, if you just want to focus on the text of a project and you don't want to be staring at all of these tools, or you don't want to be staring at your layout, sometimes just working on a crisp, clean piece of paper is easier. Get all the words out you need to, get all that done, and then you can worry about integrating it into the layout. So if we go to File, Place, all of the text that we need has been typed into a Word document, and it will remember things like line breaks and new paragraphs. Sometimes it will remember formatting, but usually you just want to type plain text into the Word document. So click on Edibles, hit open, and you'll see it loads our cursor there. And you're going to click on this first empty frame, and it'll load it into that frame. Now you'll notice that it has that overset text issue. What we're going to do is we want our text to flow into this empty one, and rather than just cutting out what doesn't fit in here and putting it in here, we're going to link the two frames together. So select this one and then click on the plus sign, and you'll see it loads our cursor again. Click into that second empty frame, and there we go, it's loaded up. Now you can see we still have an overset text issue. That's fine. We're going to be changing some paragraph and character styles, and that will make it fit. So grab your type tool again and just put your cursor on that first heading. And what you're going to do is go to paragraph styles. If you don't see it over here, just go to Window and go to Styles, and paragraph styles is going to be listed in here along with character styles. So open paragraph styles and then click subhead, and you'll see it changes that paragraph. You don't have to worry about highlighting things because paragraph styles affects whatever is in one paragraph. It can tell if you've hit the new line button or if you hit enter. So for this next section, we want that to be body copy. And then you can see it's already starting to fit better. So entrees, we want that to be a subhead. And then the next paragraph is body. And you can see it fits in now. So next thing we're going to do is, while your cursor is still in the frame, go back to your paragraph formatting options up in the top area here. And then if you go over to where it has the paragraph styles, you'll see hyphenate, and that's checkmarked. Go ahead and uncheck it, because as a rule, you don't want hyphens in your projects. You just want to eliminate every single obstacle that could make your project harder to read for people. And make sure you do that in all of the text frames. So go over to the left text frame, turn off hyphenate, and even go up top here and turn off hyphenate. Next up, what we're going to do is we're going to create our own character style. So make sure you still have your type tool selected, and we're going to go ahead and highlight Rose Martini. Leave out the comma there, you just want Rose Martini. And what we're going to do is we're going to change the style to italic, and we're going to go up here to our font color, and you're going to select Red Bright. You can see that's changed the color. Before you click off of it, it still has to be highlighted. Go to character styles and then hit that plus button there. And you've just now created a new style. Before we start applying it, go ahead and right click on it and hit edit character style. And this is where you could, if you wanted to add some different effects to it, you can do that in here too. The other thing I want you to change right now is the style name, and just name it Red Italic. And then just hit OK. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to highlight all of our dishes, hit Red Italic, and voila, it makes it italic and adds that color to it. So it just eliminates the steps. Like, even if you're doing more than just changing the style and changing the color, say if you're even changing the font and the size, making it all attached to one character style just makes things go faster rather than selecting what you want and then going up here, hitting italic, going to here, scrolling down, clicking the color. I can just go over to character styles, hit Red Italic, and it's done. So go ahead and find all of the dishes in here and make them Red Italic. Okay. And make sure you get everything. If you miss a letter, just re-highlight it. There we go. What we're going to do is we want to paste a image over in this corner here. Now, I've laid out exactly where I want this image to go. So grab your selection tool, deselect everything, and before we go to File Place, I want you to go to View, Grids and Guides, and hit Show Guides. The guides are these light blue lines here. You can actually add them to your project by clicking up in the ruler here and then just dragging down. That comes in handy if you want to precisely lay out where things are, or if something needs to go in the same place every time on every page. You can just set the guides to where it needs to go. So if you look here, you can see that a rectangle has been laid out with the guide, with two guides making two of the sides and then the margin making up the rest of it. So if we go to File, Place, grab diningroom.jpg, hit Open, and what you're going to do is you're going to go up to this top left corner that we've laid out, click and drag to the other corner here, and there you go, it's placed exactly where we want it to be. You see, if we had just clicked once, it adds it as its original size. And you can resize things. It's just faster if it's already the size you want it to be when you add it. Let me try that one more time. There we go. And it is added just where I want it to be. Next up, we're going to move these flower objects here. First off, what we're going to do is we're going to change the reference point on them. The reference point is what the program uses for, like, say it has to rotate something. Depending on where your reference point is, it's going to rotate around to different spots. Like right now it's set to like the middle left. If I rotate, it rotates around that middle left. But if I change it to, say, the upper corner here, it rotates around that corner. Or if you do the center, this reference point also, it controls like where it expands from. So if you have it in the center, it'll expand outward like that. If you have it like in the top left, it'll expand from that point. So make sure you have those flowers selected, and I want the reference point at the top left square. So you can see that there. Okay, next I want to give you some coordinates and a rotation angle, and that will put the flowers exactly where I want them to be. So go to your X coordinate and type in 1.85 inches, and it's moved it. And then we're going to put in the Y coordinate 0.05 inches. Voila. We don't have to worry about width and height. Just go over to the rotation angle. It's going to be past the scaling right here, and put in -10. There we go. Okay, next up is I want to change the, I don't really like this white color on the flower, and I want to change the color of the stroke down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my flower objects, and right now the three of them are grouped together. In order to select just that white flower, I'm going to double click. It's selected now, and you can either go up here and change the color here, or you can just go over to swatches. Make sure you have the fill selected, so that's the solid square. If we want to change the stroke, we would select the square with a hole in it, but we wanted to change the inside, so we're selecting the fill and change that to green dark. And then we're going to go to the black bar down here. Now this has a fill and a stroke on it, so we want to change both of these to green medium. So there we go. And then something that I want you guys to pay attention to in particular is because since you're going to be turning these files in, and you're using outside assets, so it's important that everything is linked the way it should be and that everything's kept together to make sure that I'm able to view the project the way it's meant to be. And I want to make sure that all of your images are embedded. So if you go to the links panel, you can see that the herbs and pansy salad, so these two images, they have a symbol next to them. That means it's embedded. So I don't have to worry about if I go to the folder and if I delete these two, it's not going to disappear from the InDesign document. Whereas if I were to delete the dining room picture, it would disappear from the InDesign document. Now, the reason you might want to leave something linked is like if you're going to be editing an image a lot, or if you're not quite sure what's going to go in there quite yet, it's handy because you can open this image up in like Photoshop or something, make the adjustments you need, save it as a JPEG again, and when you go back to InDesign, it will update this image depending on the changes you've made. But we aren't going to be worried about that right now. So I want you to make sure all of your images are embedded. So in order to do that, you just right click, embed link, and you'll see that image appears next to the file. That means it's been embedded into the InDesign file and you don't have to worry about keeping everything together. So what you're going to do is you're going to save this as your last name, prac01. Just save it as an InDesign document. And then go ahead and hit File, Export, and save it as a Adobe PDF print. Make sure it says print, because the other option is interactive. We'll do a project with that later on. Make sure it is Adobe PDF print, and then save it. This is a backup for like if you use a font that I don't have access to on my computer, or if you forget to embed an image. If you export it as a PDF, I'm going to be able to view it the way it's meant to be. So like if I'm missing a font, it's not going to give me an error and change your font. Or if you forget to embed an image, it's not going to give an error saying, I can't find this image. PDF ensures that I'm able to see it the way it's meant to be seen. So once you're finished, just put everything into a folder, create a zip folder, and then just save it as your last name, prac01, and then you turn in the zip folder onto Canvas. And that is your very first practice project in InDesign.